4, 4 or 5 is the position, and we definitely have a space advantage. And if he doesn't take, we can reroute the bishop. Like basically, we have both the king side and the queen side space advantage. So yes, what if he takes our? So instead of that, he takes our knight on e5. Then, well, after bishop takes e5, b takes e5. And then really, where could this knight go? He really doesn't want to go d8. He really doesn't have any squares after you push on g5. So probably knight d7, maybe attacking c5, but then b4. It's like the previous variation. B4 pawn move. B4 basically has the queen side space control, and we can simply grind this position out where black basically chokes on black space. Let's just split the board around. I think everybody will prefer to play white's position here. It's a lot easier to play than what black is trying to face here. Where do these knights go even? He doesn't even have to take this pawn here, and he can slowly build up on the f-file, and it's really hard to defend for black here. I have 3, knight g5, attacking f7. Maybe take here, and then knight takes e6 check, forking king and queen. So definitely everything falls apart here, just simply because of white's simple threat of, hey, I want to activate my bishop, and then g5. So yeah, I get this position a lot in the birth, but I never get to open up my bishop. My bishop is always somehow stuck on b2, doing nothing almost. Just looking at this pawn, it's like, oh, nice, I have a pawn on d4. Cool. So, all right. Any questions on this position here? Any questions? All right. The next position, I might fly through it a lot faster than what the book says. And the reason is, I think, is I'll admit, I'm afraid of endgames. And this one is more endgame heavy than the previous ones, where it was more about placing the bishops in better squares. So let me set this position up, and let's see what's up. So bishop here, pawn here. So in the previous video, the bishop, knowing the bishop in middle game, we said that you want to place the pawns on the opposite color square of your bishop as much as possible. If there's one, then it's kind of easy where to place other pieces. But if it was 2, then you want to try to get one outside and one outside. Let's see. Isn't there c6 and b5 then? There's no pawn on c6, so I don't see where c6 and b5 comes in. Let's see. Wait. Oh no, yeah. c5, yeah. Basically, yes. Okay, so I think I answered everybody's question. So c5, and if he doesn't take, then we play b4. So we just certify our queenside position a little bit. Alright, so this is a position with black to move. And so it looks pretty drawish, right? But you gotta evaluate a little bit, and you notice that black has a little more space, just a little bit more, with this pawn here on c4. It's on the middle line of the board, and it's controlling this b4 and d4 square already. And also, look at his pawns. They are. This is my English now. They are all on dark squares. There we go. And so this bishop on c8 is has more mobility than this bishop on c4, which is confined to the light squares. And so technically, if we trade off everything, it should be black to win, but you want to put as much weakness on white's position before you want to trade. So maybe trade off the rooks first. I know it's hard to believe that Acerook is trying to say trade off all the rooks, but trade off all the rooks and then use the king and use the queen and the bishop to maybe attack a few pawns. Fixate these white squared pawns on white squares. Trade off the queens, and only then, once we have like a winning endgame, then we can actually try to d5. You're in good pick. D5 is a fixated pawn. It's not that we're going to try to win this right now. We're going to try to play, get maybe even his pawn c4, b3, make him play bad moves where his pawns are all light squares, trade off everything except for the bishop, and then go for the endgame. And so, you want to try to, because now this king is also more open than this king here. So we want to trade off for safety. So, and so, he has a little bit more, his king's more open, so he can probably travel faster than white's king, the more space he has. And so, right now, this endgame right now, if we trade off everything, it's not a win. So we want to create some winning chances. So first off, let's get rid of the rooks. So rook takes f2. Rook takes f2. Give me one check. So then bishop f1. So obviously if rook f1, then we just take this queen. Nope. Frankie, no. Okay, so Frankie 4 chess as a6 and then b5 for black. That's absolutely the wrong idea. And the reason why, it might look like you're gaining space. However, you're putting your pawns on light squares. And you want to do exactly the opposite. Right now, we have the same color bishops, and you want to put the pawns on dark squares. And the reason why is because then your pawns don't really affect the mobility of your bishop. And so white has already a pretty bad advantage because he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns on white squares. Black has a good head start with 4 pawns on the light squares. The kingside pawns, they can move it to the dark squares, but only after we trade off some pieces so that we don't get mated. So doesn't mean anything if all your pawns are on dark squares and you get checkmated. So right now we're just trying to get rid of pieces. So starting in this position, a6 is definitely not a good move, I think, because after a6, take, and after rook takes, bishop takes, you're threatening this pawn, but now I can win this pawn, I think. Yeah, you can take this pawn though. It's very unclear. It's something that white could probably draw. I know like this it looks pretty, but it's just the wrong idea for the endgame. So here, keep all the pawns on dark squares. It's okay. We're all here to learn. It's not like a stupid idea. It's just an idea that was wrong. So don't say it's stupid. So that's why we're doing these, because I don't know. I would have done a6 b5, but if you just don't know your principles, a6 b5 really looks good. Really looks tempting. a6 is the random move. b5, look at that. You have all this space, but after we trade off all the material, oh yes, more space. I think this actually wins the bishop. No, not yet. All these are light squares. Now, we can maybe try to win. All these dark squares are a little bit weak, so maybe we can like slip our king back here. So something you don't want to create weaknesses about. So, all right. So good question. So after rook takes f2, try to trade off a little bit, getting rid of the rooks. Rook takes f2, and so queen 1 check. So no rook f1 because of this. Actually, doesn't matter. Takes, check, and then bishop takes, and then take. So we're down whole queen. And king g2, then mate. So no king, rook f1. So now white has played bishop to f1. And notice the space control on this bishop here. It's on the first. It's back to where it started. Like this is like 20 moves, maybe 30 moves later, and it's back to where it started, back to the F1 square. So this bishop is probably getting worse and worse and worse. So after bishop F1, rook takes F2, queen takes F2, and now we don't want to trade queens yet. We play queen E5. So we're basically keeping the queens on the board because with the rooks off, there's less major pieces, and now we just there's less likelihood of a checkmate with the double rooks on the F file. And now with the queen more centralized than this queen on F2, we have more squares. We can try to provoke white to put all his pawns on light squares. So actually, after queen E5, queen E2 is like, hey, you want to trade? And you can't take this pawn B2, well, obviously, it's a check and then the bishop. And so it's like queen E2. So now queen D4 check. It's like, no, I don't want to trade. Thank you. King H8. And now, king F8 stops the white's queen from going through E8, E7, E6, E5 even, E4, and E3. Okay, he can go to E1, but that's fine. But he can't go to any of these squares after king F8. So something to look for. Even though, it's a very open position, it's the end game, you gotta get your king out. So notice this king is already one square away from being on the center file, versus this king is just stuck in the corner. So the bad bishop on F1, the king in the corner, versus black's better bishop on, this is on a original square, I agree. But it's on, the bishop has more mobility, the king is more active, and can't get even more active after, trading queens in the future. But these little baby steps are what we're taking towards the end game. And so, after king F8, white plays C4. And, I don't have to ask to get an answer. Is this a good move or bad move? Obviously bad, because, well, you're putting one more pawn on a light square. It protects D5, correct. But you're putting one more square on, one more pawn, one more piece. Technically pawns are not considered pieces, but whatever. You're putting one more piece on light squares. Will king f7 be a good move? Again, we're trying to keep everything on dark squares. Yes, king f7 is probably in here. I would say that maybe there is multiple checks that probably can get white into this position. So queen f3 check, maybe. I don't know, and then king f8. You can also argue queen f3 check. I think the black played this in essence is basically to control these two squares, but king f7 does the same thing. I guess my only answer is these squares are all on dark squares. And so if the bishop wants to go to f7, it can. And maybe attack d5. Maybe that's the plan, Or, bishop b7, you can attack. And so king f7 kind of blocks in, you're putting in pieces on light squares. Maybe that's the reason why the difference between king f7 and king f8. But overall, black has a better position in terms of the bishop and the king already towards the endgame. So we're working towards the endgame. So, good question. So, so after this, c4. And so now what? Well, I guess the difference is, queen f3 check, king g7, c3, queen 1, king g1. Wait, excuse me. After queen to d4 check, king to h2 was played. So now king f8. So same thing, c4, except after this check. Come on. No, wait. after